So this is the year you want to create a booktube. You've probably been thinking about joining the booktube community for a long time and just sort of found every aspect of it a little bit overwhelming. And if that's the case, don't worry, I have 100% been there. And besides not knowing what you need to do or how to start, there's not really a lot of guides for booktube specifically out. Like, I know there are a ton of generic how to start your YouTube channel sort of videos out there, and they give you a bunch of different information, but booktube, review communities, and I'd say even video essays are like a little bit of their own beast. They have an entirely different kind of format. They're trying to like gather a different kind of audience, and the expectations and realities in this sphere are just different than some of the other ones you might come across on YouTube. So I thought it might be fun for me to put a guide together specifically for people looking to start their YouTube journey in one of these kinds of tracks. And full transparency here, I'm still definitely in the beginning of my own personal booktube journey, so these are more like things I learned or wish I had known when I had started versus like the ultimate defining guide with 100% success guarantee worked in. And while I was writing this guide, it sort of became massively long, and I don't want this necessarily to be intimidating for beginners. So you should know, like, the best thing you can do if you want to start something is just to start it. Like, don't wait for the optimal time, don't wait to have everything together. If you've got an idea, you've got filming equipment, some kind of editing and upload ability, you should go ahead and do it. Because the sooner you start, the sooner you'll get into a routine, a rhythm, the sooner you'll have a better sense of self, and it'll just all start to flow better because you're working on something versus always holding back and just waiting for the stars to align. So let's start with pre-planning creating a channel. This is gonna start like with someone who's never posted a video, but if you're just like new and looking for additional tips, this might not be as helpful. First, I would consider your budget. How much were you planning to spend on buying books, equipment for booktube filming, equipment on editing, thumbnails, so on and so forth? There's a lot of little things with booktubing that can add up, and it doesn't have to. You can get all of your books from the library if you've got a good library. You can use your phone to film and do audio. And if you're not a Mac user, which has a free iMovie software installed, you can use DaVinci Resolve, which can be a professional grade free editing software as well. In theory, everything can be free, but like the reality of it is that you're probably going to want to spend money at some point in time. So you should figure out how much you're willing to spend and what you think you should prioritize. Personally, I would prioritize it on books and like the enjoyable hobby reading stuff first, because booktube's a pretty casual format. I know plenty of successful creators in the niche who are still using their phones and are using very minimal editing software. But I guess it also depends on how you want to express your own creativity and stuff. Like, I have upgraded from a phone into a camera, and I have more professional editing software. I have assets that I've bought and paid for that I use in editing, and all of that is just more like me trying to create my own defined style and trying to play around with editing and what I find like creatively fulfilling to do in a video. And I should say all of that is built up over time. Like, I incorporated one element at a time to slowly have like this more large-scale production. It wasn't something that I did from the word jump. Like, if you look at my earliest videos, which all of them are publicly available, they're pretty bare bones. Next most important thing is setting expectation. If you do not already have some kind of built-in audience when you publish that first video, be prepared for 0 views, 10 views, 4 views. Don't get me wrong, some people post and their first video is a breakout viral success, but that's going to be like the 0.001%. And if you're not comfortable like presenting and speaking out into the void for like several months, that's gonna feel really demoralizing. Next, I would set some goals, and they should be goals that you can control and accomplish. So not how many people watch, not how many people subscribe, not when you can get monetized. I mean, you can try to influence those things by creating better videos that people want to watch, by packaging them better, but all of that is stuff that you kind of have to like learn to do. So it's better for you to focus on individual techniques and elements within that. You know, maybe you want to work on your scripting, maybe you want to work on your eye contact with camera, maybe you want to work on your consistency of uploads, maybe you're looking to learn a certain set of skills in video or marketing or recording or editing. I would make that my goal set and like my status of achievement and success. And then like a suggested strategy I might give someone who's starting from scratch is to publish not one video, but anywhere from 3 to 5 videos at at the start. And the reason I would wait to publish my videos until I had 3 to 5 is because it gives the algorithm a little bit more idea of what your videos are about and what your channel is going to be about. Also, like if someone does stumble across one of your videos and likes it, you immediately have a catalog of a couple other things they could watch, and that will help you build a viewership and like a community around you in general. This might not be possible if you start by just posting the one video first and then working your way up to a catalog. You'll be doing what most of us have done, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but that's just one suggestion of an easier way to start. I also tend to recommend that you have a couple of videos locked and loaded in the chamber to release down the road. So like if I were doing my ideal launch, I'd have 3 to 5 videos set up on launch day, and then I'd have another 2 to 5 videos scheduled out for weekly releases, and continue working on filming and editing so that I'd always have a couple of videos ready to go ahead of what I was currently recording. One of the hardest things for me was realizing how long the scripting, filming, and editing process would be, so having a couple of videos buffering me at all times has always been really helpful. Personally, I'm always trying to think of a couple quick, easy turnaround videos that I could put anywhere in my schedule, and just having those ready on standby in case something is taking me longer than I expected. And that rolls me into you sort of planning how often you plan to upload. Because Booktube is a little bit of a slower niche, you could upload as little as once a month and probably maintain consistent viewership. But if you're actually looking to get more viewers, to grow your channel, you know, at this early entry point, I think you have to upload at least once a week. And from my observation, the ideal number of times is twice a week. Now, nothing is going to work if it's not a schedule you can personally maintain without burnout. So for my channel, my goal for the longest was once a week uploads, because that's all I could commit to without burnout. More recently, I've committed to 2 long forms and 1 short, and really that's because my scripting, filming, and editing process has sped itself up, and I've had a little bit extra free time, so those elements have combined to give me more flexibility in my own scheduling. But if once a week is good for you, once every other week, once every 3 weeks, it needs to be something that you can be consistent on, and the consistency is more important than frequency. So let's move into like the idea of planning for a video kind of phase. Personally, I keep a spreadsheet with all of my different ideas written down, and I place some of these ideas on a calendar if I think that they're related to the season or certain release, and that way I know to plan everything out so I can have those ideas released then. And if I miss that release date, I know maybe those ideas aren't worth my time right now. It's one of those things where you have a million ideas before you start the channel, and then once you're in the middle of it, sometimes it can be hard to remember all the different ideas, so just having a log of it somewhere really helps, especially when you feel like your head empty on it. Probably not at the start of your process, but as you continue your journey, you'll probably end up with some solid formats that you can keep templates on so that it's easier for you to convert a new video over into that kind of thing. And if you are wondering where to start for some reason, I would suggest using the common Booktube formats. So that's going to be like monthly reading wrap-ups, book hauls, book unhauls, book tags, what's on your TBR, which is to be read, or a list of books you DNF'd, a list of book recommendations in a specific genre. I think it's really important to post some, maybe all of these staples to see what work for you in your channel. But also, if you follow these staples, you will have a continuous stream of content. That's part of why they become regular bookish staples. A couple formats I've noticed seem to be outliers and more successful for me on my channel are going to be like tier lists or book rankings of any kind, or even like tier lists or bracket lists of characters or tropes or bookish drama. Anything bookish drama related is going to end up giving you more views, although you should be careful about that and wonder if you're curating the right audience, or if this is something that you have the energy and time to continually talk about. The rant review always does really well. Also, like here's the entire plot of, or here's the timeline for, usually does pretty well, especially if it's a popular series. Story explained seems to work pretty well. I read 100 or 50 of X kind of book, and here's what I learned. I read the entire backlist of X author, and these are my thoughts. Seems like Goodreads anything content does well. Although selfishly, I wish you wouldn't do too much Goodreads content, because I think as a bookish community, we should be migrating off the platform into a different review format. If you're looking for a couple of popular bookish community things, there's the Booktube newbie tag, there's the mid-year freakout tag, which in June you'll see a ton of booktubers participate in, in and comment on everyone else's feed. I think it's so much fun to see what people have read for 6 months in and where they are with their own goals. And then at the end of the year, people do a lot of best of, worst of kind of book lists, and I love those little yearly recap snapshots too. Beyond that, there's a ton of readathons and group creators doing book groups and stuff, and it really feels like most of this is just open for you to join in and video your own experience. A couple of YouTube idea myths that I've found so far: reviewing classics gets you views. In my experience, that's a really mixed bag, and even when I've done okay reviewing a classic, I've done a lot of work to get those eyes, and the views haven't been enough to even put it on like my top 20 list of most viewed videos. If you want to read and review classics, you totally should, but do not go into that thinking that you're going to get a lot of views or responses. Hopping on trendy topics to get views, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. Also, you have to question who you're drawing in with those kind of trendy topics. Like, is this the viewership you want to court? Do you actually have something you want to say? Are you jumping on a bandwagon? It could be worthwhile for you and your content, but that's a personal decision and not like a hard and fast rule. Vlogging is one of the things I think gets the least amount of views for most booktubers. People who do it consistently do it because they enjoy vlogging. Additionally, if you haven't done a lot of video recording before, just know that vlogging is some of the most time-intensive work you'll ever do. First of all, there's just continuous filming while you're reading. There's possibly continuous filming while you're doing chores or something else that you want to capture for the vlog. Then you have to upload all of those shots, and you have to put speed up, slow down, you have to find music for it, you have to put it in an order that makes sense. It's a lot more time consuming than normal editing, and usually it's for lower than average views. All of which kind of rolls me into the scripting phase. Not everyone is going to use this phase. Some people are really off the cuff and just speak to camera, and that's totally fine. Some people are going to want to script every single line out and read it off cards or read it off their computer or memorize it. That's fine if that's you too, but that is going to bake a little extra time in if you're not a fast memorizer. Personally, I recommend a middle ground where you have some bullet points that you can keep referring to sort of like keep yourself on track, but at the same time where you're communicating original, authentic thoughts to the camera at that point in time. Which finally gets me to the filming phase. Lucky for us, most booktube and even most like video essays or movie reviews is just a person talking to a camera, so there's not as much involved as there is for some other formats. Your equipment can be pretty simple. You can use just your phone. You can look at different video cameras, microphones, ring lights, camera stands, all that kind of stuff too. This is not going to be a guide for that. If you want to do that kind of thing, there's plenty of different guides for equipment on YouTube. My personal setup has upgraded a lot over time. I started with my phone, and since then I've gone to a Nikon vlogging camera. I chose Nikon because I'm familiar with that brand, and I chose this specific camera because it had a whole vlogging set, including like one of those mics that's on the top of the camera, and I was struggling a lot with sound, so I just wanted something that would be simple. As far as lighting goes, I have my lights over here on and my light over here on, and I've got two windows that let in natural light. And that's why you see from video to video, lighting varies a lot for me because sometimes it's sunny out and sometimes it's cloudy. Also, you can tell when the time of day is shifting because of how long it's taking me to film. These are like the pros and cons to easy setups. The good news is it takes me less time to set up than it would otherwise. Usually it takes me about 30 minutes to move my camera around, get the lights on, get the chair down, you know, to put everything in its place, make sure I'm happy with my camera angle, and just sit down and start filming. Which brings me to a strategy called batch filming. Because it takes me about 30 minutes to set everything up and probably another 10 minutes to take everything down, I prefer to sit down and film a couple of videos at a time just to like maximize all of that time. It depends. Like right now this video is going pretty shaky because the puppy really would like me to stop and play with it, but it's not quite time for me to do that in the day yet, and I'm really trying to push through and get the maximum amount of batch filming done. As far as what you should use for a background, obviously I'm using a blank wall that I am green screening green backgrounds for. But I do have a couple of other setups. Historically, I've got a bookshelf in the house that I film in front of. I also have like an electric fireplace I'll sit down and film in front of. I've used my guest bedroom and that guest bedroom headboard before. It really depends on what I'm doing, what kind of vibe I'm looking for. Maggie over at Maggie's Books and Stuff actually has a really great visual about aesthetics and setting everything up. So I'm gonna link her tutorial in the description down below. Also, if you want to use DaVinci Resolve, she has a tutorial on exactly how to edit in DaVinci, which I think is a really great one if you're looking for that. The other thing to consider about filming is what format you're gonna do it on, whether it's gonna be 1080p, 4K, or maybe even 8K. I personally film in 4K, but I don't necessarily suggest that other people do that because I don't know that most people who watch these videos care about the 4K quality. I think it's the same to them if it's 4K or 1080p. And the files for 4K are flippin' massive, which is something you should consider when you take up a filming hobby. Where are you gonna store all of these files? What are you gonna edit on? Now, I'm really lucky. I have a cloud drive and I also have a detachable device. So I have a lot of access to space, but if you're short on space, you probably wanna film in 1080 for a while and you probably wanna be clearing your PC or laptop off pretty regularly. As it is, I have a laptop with about a terabyte of space that I use for editing, and I have to be cleaning it and sweeping it on the regular to keep all the file sizes down. It would be easier if I filmed in 1080, but because I can film in 4K and I just like to do the best that I can, that's what I'm doing. Another thing to think about is whether or not you're going to keep all your videos once you're done with them and have uploaded them to YouTube. I have a whole separate storage filing system for that, but I don't think most people are able to do that. So if you want to do that, is another investment in file and storage stuff. Also, a pause moment here for you to think about whether or not you need to make YouTube thumbnail faces. When I am making my YouTube thumbnail, I pick a still from the video out with my face in a way I like, and I export that still out of the video. But a lot of people make faces either before or after their filming situations so that they can have a bunch of intentionally posed and outrageous photos. You should make that sort of decision and make sure you add time into your schedule if you want to do that. All of this moves us into the editing phase. As I said, DaVinci Resolve is free. So if you're looking for an editing software and you don't have a Mac, that's what I would suggest. If you have a Mac, then you have iMovie on your device already, and I recommend starting with that and seeing how you like it. It's a pretty basic software, but it's also super easy to use, very intuitive. When I first started, because I am a Mac user, I was using iMovie, and I didn't even need to look up any tutorials on what to do or how to do it. It was just that clear to me, like based off of the buttons and stuff, and I had no experience in an editing software. Now, I have upgraded to Final Cut Pro. My partner gave it to me as a gift, and I personally love it, but as you can see, I'm using a green screen background effect here, which I need Final Cut Pro for. I don't think iMovie can do that. I play around with different kinds of titles and animations pretty frequently. I do some other kinds of projects with Final Cut Pro besides just the booktubing stuff. But like, if your plan right now is just to talk to a camera and give your takes on books, you don't plan to do some kind of background, you don't plan to add any music, you don't plan to do anything elaborate with titles or other things, then I do think that Final Cut Pro is sort of overpowered for what you're doing. I love its ability to color grade. If you're wondering, I pretty much always use the spring sun filter, and sometimes I edit it to like desaturate certain things or focus on a different color than it is, but I like that hypersaturated, slightly cool look that spring sun just gives automatically. There are also some audio features here in Final Cut Pro. If you're wondering what I do with my sound, I click the noise removal automatically. I click the magic wand to analyze the sound. If it automatically picks something, I let that ride, but I usually click background noise there too. And then I go to the volume bar and I slide that up until I start to see yellow peaking. And then I slide it a little back down to get rid of the yellow peaking so it's as loud as it can be without going into that too loud category. That's something I personally need because I'm sort of a quiet talker, so like raising that volume is important. But how much audio editing you need in your software is going to depend very heavily on how much background noise you have and what your audio setup looks like. So that's something that you should definitely do individualized research for what you have on hand. As far as specific edits go, I would look at YouTubers you enjoy watching and seeing how they edit their videos. Now personally, I like to cut all of my extra breath works out. I like to make things feel quick and snappy and continually going. But there are definitely a lot of booktubers and video essayists who use more natural paces. I know that Criminali and Jess Owens usually keep both their ums, their ahs, their heavy breathing in. With Criminali stating specifically he does this because he's looking for like that authentic conversation. He wants it to be like a conversation between two friends. So keeping those elements in is more true to what actual real life is. Certainly I enjoy watching both of those YouTube channels. So even though I like a little bit quicker delivery, a little bit more polished, rapid, edited pace, doesn't stop me from watching things that are a little bit more naturalized. And maybe for you in the beginning, it'll be easier to have a more natural one take-ish kind of flow. You will find your own editing style once you get in there and start doing it. Also, if you do want that more polished editing style, be prepared for it to take more time. And it's something you're going to want to consider a little bit in the filming end too, because like I talk a lot with my hands. So if I chop everything up where there's a breath or a pause or even a filler word, pretty good with not using or ah, but I do use like, and, or other conjunctions to kind of tie me over. And I can cut those out. But when I do, because I talk with my hands, sometimes I look like a crazy spaz on the video portion. But I've got a lot better at that because now I know to take things from the top, to hold my hand where I was at the last take, and then start all over again. You know, it's a learning process, and even then it doesn't always work out. Like if the doggos are very active, sometimes I just have to deal with them being in frame, or a jump cut of them being there and then not being there, or even just like them alerting me to the fact I have to be wrapping things up so I can't take as many takes as maybe necessary to get the ideal end product. Whatever you choose for an editing software and whatever style of editing you choose to do, there are a ton of tutorials. I have found so many of them for Final Cut Pro. So you've edited everything, you've hit the export, you finally got a video. Now what? Let's talk about the title, the thumbnail, and all those little nitty-gritty video parts. So ideally, when you come up with your idea and you're doing your scripting phase, you're also coming up with a title and thumbnail to go with it. That's not usually how things work out for me. The packaging is very important to get those views, so you do sort of want to think about it a little bit and spend some time polishing it. I'm still personally working on having engaging titles. Usually mine are more direct than like driving intrigue. Clarity is okay. There are definitely people like in the search engine back end of things who will like having that clarity and will be looking for exactly that, and happy to see that you made it very clear for them. But I guess it depends a little bit on what sort of audience you want. Like if you want someone who's looking for clarity, one specific thing, then those clear titles are where you want to go. And if you're looking for someone who's looking to be entertained and are looking to be driven by interests, or might like do something because of an outrageous title, then you need something that's a little bit more clickbaity, curiosity driven, consumable. I definitely think there's a balance somewhere in there to strike, and I'm working on it. Part of it I think comes into how things play with your thumbnail, and thumbnails are also sort of difficult for me, although I think I've sort of perfected a lot of elements of it over the past 6 months. You really want to follow the rule of threes. Ideally, one of those things is going to be your face, if you're a channel that shows your face on camera. The next thing is going to be a book, assuming you're talking about a book or a series, and then 1 or 2 words with a very vague background that like lets the words pop. Ideally something like rant review or what exclamation marks, like very short, very easy to read. And you're not going to want the font to be in the bottom of your thumbnail screen because there's going to be like a little time bar down there, so no one's going to be able to read that part of your thumbnail if you do it like that. You really do have to think about how the thumbnail will look on a phone. Now if you're doing vlogging, you can have a more traditional vlog style thumbnail, which is more cluttered and kind of all over the place. And if you're doing a reading wrap up, you might want more than one book in the background, and then the question there is whether or not to keep the titles seen or if you want to want to blur them a little bit to keep some mystery going on there. As far as what you can use to make these thumbnails, Canva is a great free option if you have no design layout experience and you want to see a couple pre-done things. But realistically, you can make a thumbnail on Google Slides, on PowerPoint, on Keynote. A 16:9 slide is the right layout size for a YouTube thumbnail. So like if you have the assets or design work already in hand, if you have a familiarity with that, you can do it in that space, save it as an image, and upload it to YouTube, no problem. There is some questioning about the A/B thumbnail testing. The real answer is if you're not getting at least 1,000 clicks on a video a week, you're not getting enough click-through rate to really have a good A/B thumbnail test. Additionally, you'd want a thumbnail test at different times of the year if you were really in the weeds on it. But for Booktube, it's not generally that deep. There's no large creator that I could find who actually does A/B thumbnail testing. They just usually have the one thumbnail and don't change it. It's a pretty well-known established format. Like you follow it, you'll get as many views as everyone else. If you did want to use A/B thumbnail testing for some reason, and I do because I just can't help myself, usually I'm doing it between a thumbnail with my face and a thumbnail without my face, or a thumbnail with text and a thumbnail without text. And the way that works out is I'm just curious to see if people like are more interested because of like a fun emotive face, or if they're just more interested in a big close-up of the thing I'm talking about. I don't generally see any feedback from A/B testing either. Like the end of the 2 weeks comes up, there's no discernible results, and I'm just picking one of those choices. Some other elements you might have questions about: tags. Tags do not matter at all and have not for some time. The only thing that you'd want to waste your time on with tags is if you're talking about something that's commonly misspelled, you want to include the misspellings in the tags. If for some reason you wanted to add other stuff in there too, you certainly can, but don't waste more than like 3 to 5 minutes on it max because it really has no impact. What I would spend some time focusing in on is the description. Now, I'm sort of mixed on whether or not I spend any time on my description. Sometimes there's something there and sometimes not so much. But ideally, you want to do like a little, hey everybody, this video is about blah, blah, blah. Stuff that I would definitely include in description, any book titles or authors that are mentioned in your video. I would link to any creators you might have gotten an idea off of, you might be talking about or piggybacking off of. And then personally, I pretty much always put in some kind of timestamp, so that way if the viewer wants to skip around, they can. Or if the viewer is watching something and wondering where it's going, they can get an idea based off of the titles and the timestamps. Then lastly, you might want to have links to your other social media, to other playlists or other related videos down in the bottom. You can pretty much copy paste this from video to video. At this point in time, I should update what mine is, but generally it's the same for every video, which playlist someone might like, where my other social medias are, that kind of stuff. Oh, and lastly is hashtags. You can put as many hashtags as you want in, but the first 3 hashtags you choose are going to show up at the top of your video next to your title, so I would make sure those are the 3 most relevant. Right now, I don't feel like hashtags play a significant role in YouTube search or in how people find you. Something else you might want to consider getting into is playlists. As a YouTube feature, I feel like they're dying a little bit, but I still am personally a huge fan because I can make playlists that have to do with the genre of book, the tropes involved, maybe a certain author specifically, a certain kind of plot point. For me, it's as much a way for me to track my own personal reading trends as it is to recommend to people other videos that are like this one that they might like. Obviously, when you're just starting, you're not going to have a huge plethora of playlists, but I feel like it builds out pretty quickly, just sort of depending on what you want to track or how you want to arrange those playlists. Also, when you're uploading, you have an option for an end screen. Up to you what you do. For me, I always do like the 3 options. So the video that YouTube thinks someone will like based off of watching this video, a playlist that I get to choose and recommend, and then like my channel circle over here. And then cards, I don't think it's super important to do cards from like a getting more views kind of scenario, but I do think it's important for you to think about what other videos you would link to the video you're currently making. It helps create cohesion within the channel. It's okay if you're doing something that's not connected to everything else you have, like you're trying something new, but if every single video you do has no connections at all and you can't see ever making any videos that have any connections, then maybe you need to think about your channel's overall overall cohesion. Although again, that sort of depends on what your goals are on YouTube. There's this thing way down on the list called category, and I forget about it all the time because I just have mine set to default on entertainment. But you do have to opt into one of these categories, and it can be really nerve-wracking for someone who's never seen it before. I really think the only point of these categories is so that YouTube knows how to compare your video to other videos in the same genre. And I think for most booktube videos, it's going to have to be either entertainment or education. I think I have 2 or 3 videos at this juncture I actually placed under education instead, and there are a couple of more options for you to niche down in education if you select that, which make it pretty clear to me that most things in booktube probably belong in entertainment, and most things I make belong in the entertainment category. Now I do have a little very quick note about branding. Technically we should have talked about this before you started your YouTube channel, but I think it's kind of overwhelming, and also branding makes everything sound like polished and pre-thought out, and a big thing about YouTube is just coming on and being you and being authentic and in the moment. In this context, branding means creating a style that's unique to you and recognizable to the viewer. So like, you shouldn't be compromising what you're saying or not saying or anything like that. I just mean like when you make thumbnails, you might want to use the same font, whichever font that is, and you probably want it to be the same color. This is something you're going to develop as time goes on, but you should make notes of your own personal preferences and things you like. Like for me, I'm using a marker style font, and I use it in my video titles as well as in my thumbnails. And in my thumbnails, I like that color gradient font, and I'm always using the same color gradient font. Likewise for visuals and stuff, I prefer like a cartoony animated style, and when I can, I like it to be watercolor style. And even in my camera effects and transitions, I usually choose like an ink or watercolor style over, I don't know, a glitch or neon style. Although I have some videos where everything theming wise works out that it goes that way. Also, I have a couple of standby templates that I think are just like me and the way I review things, or the sort of lens I bring to media. Again, all of this is stuff I have personally developed over time, and is something that you too will develop over time, but I think the important thing is for you just to be aware of it and making conscious opt-in choices. Also, it doesn't have to be the same thing from when you start to right now. Like, I think my font choice when I first started was a typeset font, and I've moved it over to marker. And when I started working with various different kinds of B-roll, it was just whatever B-roll I could get my hands on, and now that I have more of a library and a format, I can create something that looks a little bit more visually consistent some of the time. Not all the time, but I try. And then lastly, a little bit of advice about numbers obsessing. So in the beginning, you're not going to be getting a lot of views or subscribers or anything, probably. And because of that, everything you get is going to be statistically insignificant, and you're not really going to be able to make any massive decisions based off of it, which is going to be very frustrating. I really advocate for patience, not stressing the numbers too much, and for like sort of setting little goals. Like, you can see what gets more views than other things, and you can try to figure out why that worked. If it was like really good thumbnail packaging, if it was a great title, if there's extra interest in this particular book, like it was a popular book or the sequel just released or something, if it was seasonally appropriate. There's a million reasons something takes off or doesn't take off. Even if you have more influential numbers, it can be very hard to determine why one thing worked and another thing didn't. I think it's more important for you to celebrate little wins you have than it is for you to try and get any information from the numbers, probably for the first year, maybe even the first 2 years. If you did want an in-depth tutorial on like what analytics you should be looking at and what are most important, I'm actually going to link YouTube podcasts, The Boost by vidIQ, excellent peek at what you should be paying most attention to and what those things are telling you. And they could do way better than me in explaining things and trying to help you figure out what is and isn't successful. But yeah, that's literally everything I can think of that you might need to know before starting a booktube channel, or if you're early in your creation, might help you sort of move along. But talk to me. If you liked this series and want to see more like little beginner guides, tutorials, suggest what those would be in the comments down below. And as always, keep reading.